the Non-Proliferation Treaty and the International Atomic Energy Agency that oversees it have been infiltrated by MI6. At least that's according to some London journalists who've been looking into this. That's one of the reasons why Iran is feeling it's necessary to withdraw from the regime of the IAEA, because they have been focusing on criticizing Iran, even though Iran has been sticking to the various the treaty itself, and also the restrictions which the IAEA have been putting on them. So the IAEA has been weaponized to use against Iran. It really should be focusing on Israel. There should be also reports by the IAEA on people who haven't signed the NPT, like the Israelis, and do have nuclear weapons. Whereas Iran, it seems, have no nuclear weapons, just a nuclear program. The United Nations have not really done very well. They've not covered themselves in glory at all. I think ever since probably the 1960s, when the Secretary-General Dag Hammarskjöld, who was a very hands-on Secretary-General, he was flying around the world doing shuttle diplomacy to stop smaller wars in various parts. Obviously, he couldn't stop the Korean War or the Vietnam War, things on that sort of scale, but he was making sure that small conflicts did not get bigger. And it looks as if that is why he was assassinated in the 1960s. And I think the message, a bit like with American presidents, has gone down very clearly to succeeding Secretary Generals, as it has to succeeding US presidents. If you start to work for peace in the world actively and make sure it happens and show courage, you will be assassinated. And this may be a message which many succeeding UN Secretary Generals have taken. I mean, it's much easier for them, for example, to go around speaking about climate change. World War III and the approach of World War III, it seems, is too difficult for the United Nations. And the 1960s was important for the UN, because we also had the Six-Day War, 1967, and the crucial resolution passed by the UN Security Council with no veto by the United States, but with a proper passing of it, Resolution 242. Resolution 242 ordered the Israelis out of occupied territories that they'd stolen in the Six-Day War. And that has never been implemented, never. So if Guterres wants the UN to be taken seriously, he has to roll things back right to the 1960s and say the Israelis have got to start behaving themselves and do what was ordered all that time back unanimously, not by the General Assembly, by the UN Security Council. So I think that's the problem with the UN, is it just simply doesn't have the guts anymore to take on the really serious problems which could be a genuine threat to world peace, like World War III, so it's just not got the courage that it needs to have.
Definitely. From targeted assassinations, Mr. Gosling, of nuclear scientists to military commanders, and now attacks, we had also attacks on residential areas. Does this mean that we are witnessing the erosion of the so-called rules-based international order by Washington and Tel Aviv?
I think you're right, and London, by the way, because I think that the British are very much behind this, although they try to play good cop to America's bad cop. We have today 20 years exactly since the 7/7 bombings in central London, where there were 4 big bombs went off, killing 52, I think if you include the bombers, so-called bombers themselves, 56 people. And that is being blamed, as it was at the time, on Muslims. Of course, it's not. If you look very carefully, you'll see the bombs were underneath those tube trains. They weren't suicide bombers in the trains. You'll find also Benjamin Netanyahu was in London that day, and he, from his embassy, received a warning to stay away from where the bombs were happening. Nobody else in London got that warning, and the rest of London, it was a surprise attack. So how did the Netanyahu and the Israeli embassy know those bombs were about to go off? That was reported by the Associated Press, by the way, in Tel Aviv. In the Leeds bookshop where these so-called bombers came from, was being run by a guy from the Special Boat Service, which is one of the British Special Forces who'd converted to Islam. So MI6 were all over the bookshop the alleged bombers are supposed to have come from. And finally, the Finsbury Park Mosque, there was a section of it being run by Al-Mujaroon, which is known to be an MI6 operation. So this is the British intelligence service blowing up their own people, using Muslims as patsies to blow them up, and then to try and make out, as they still are to this day, that this was not a false flag attack, which it was, in central London. And many people have forgotten that Benjamin Netanyahu himself was in London that day and had a warning of the attacks. Maybe he was even involved in those attacks. So these sorts of assassinations, dirty tricks, are all of the work of the intelligence services like the Mossad, like MI6, and they think that they can shape the entire narrative using television and the mass media. Unfortunately, there are some of us who are right onto them, and they're going to fail if they think that the whole world is going to believe their lies, whether it's to do with the nuclear weapons program of Iran, or whether it's to do with the Muslim terrorists in London, neither of which exist.
Tony Gosling.